Hello, welcome back. So this is part 2 of my top 20 horror video games. So this one is going to be counting down from 10 to 1, and we're going to see what my favourite is. So these are like the scariest games that I've played, I guess. These ones are going to be slightly more recent. Part 1 was a lot of retro games and old school games, and I have to say thank you to everyone who's not only subscribed but shared the video on their social media or just giving me a bit of feedback on it. It was really nice. So yeah, thank you very much for your support. This channel's quite new. It's only just over a month old and I'm quite enjoying it. So yeah, top 10, let's get into it. So in at number 10, we have Bioshock. So this is the first Bioshock that we're talking about. There is 3 of them. This one, I think, is just stunning. It's a beautiful game. It's Art Deco, and it has a really great premise. You are basically stuck in a sort of utopian city underwater, right at the bottom of the sea. The city's called Rapture, and when you look around it, it's a really, really beautiful decor, but you do notice that everywhere is leaking. There's water flooding in from certain places, and you do feel like you're very much, trapped in this place that is going to fall down. It's a first-person shooter and also has abilities in it that you can require by harvesting this thing called Adam, which gives you superpowers, like you can throw fireballs or even summon insects and all sorts of things. The villains in it are mostly sort of crazy people, crazy humans that have been down there too long. There's also these sort of huge things called Big Daddies, not the wrestler from the 80s. I realise that's showing my age. But these things are huge. They look like people in sort of old rusty spacesuits with a drill for a hand. And they protect these little girls called Little Sisters. And the Little Sisters have the sort of Adam inside them as something that you can harvest from them to get your powers. So you can either choose to befriend the Little Sisters or harvest them, but they do have protectors. The Big Daddies also do tend to patrol the halls of Rapture as well. So they're the most famous thing about the game, I think, really. And this one, I just thought it had really great sort of scary horror elements, especially some of the settings in Rapture as well. There are 2 other games, as I mentioned. The second one is very much like a sequel to the first one. So I think even though I enjoyed it, the novelty had kind of worn off by then in terms of what was actually given to us in the first Bioshock. So I didn't enjoy it as much, I don't think, but it was still a good game. The third one, Bioshock Infinite, is not really horror anymore. It's more of an action game, and that is a city that is in the sky. And you sort of hook onto various railings to get parts of the city and fight all the sky racists. And that one's good fun as well, but as I say, it didn't make the cut because it's not a horror. So yeah, check out Bioshock. They have done a remastered version of the trilogy, so that's definitely worth checking out. It looks great. It's definitely one that I'd say is good for someone who doesn't want a sort of full-on horror experience. It's not scary all the way through. It just has horror elements to it. So if you're not particularly a huge fan of horror games, but you do want a few scares, this one would definitely be the one to check out. So at number 9, we have Dead Space. And that is a horror game set in space, as the title suggests. And this one, if you like films like Alien and Event Horizon, Sunshine to some extent, I guess, things like that, it's very much along those lines. You are trapped in a space station and you are basically being overrun by these crazy monsters that have sort of massive spiked tentacles and arms and limbs. The good thing about this game is that there is no HUD, there's no heads-up display. So the way that you figure out what your health is by the lights on the back of the spacesuit that the main character Isaac has, which I thought was very clever. And your ammunition, how much ammo you have, is actually displayed on your gun. So there's nothing else on the screen apart from what's going on, apart from the action, and it makes it really immersive, a really great sort of setting as well to make you feel like you're just in this and you're not playing a computer game, you're kind of actually on the space station. And the good thing about this one is the innovative way that you have to defeat your enemies. So you have these guns that shoot sort of lasers or buzz saws, all sorts of things, and you have to take out the limbs of your enemies. So usually in video games you're going for, you know, the head or the heart, but this one, nope, you got to take out their limbs, and it's not that easy, especially when they're waving them around all the time. So that was quite a good element to it. There's also some really good anti-gravity sort of set pieces in this as well, and it really shows you just how genius the first game is. So as I mentioned with the Bioshock one, this one also is a trilogy. The second of Dead Space is still quite good. It felt a little bit rushed, and it certainly was just as scary, but probably didn't have as strong a story as the first one. The third one I haven't played yet, but I do now have a copy, and that is because it's co-op. And if you watch my first video, you'll realise that I do like a co-op game, especially couch co-op, you know, playing with someone in the same room. I'm not always a massive fan of online multiplayer stuff, but if you can play with, you know, a friend or a partner in the room, I find it just a really great experience. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing that one as well. There's also a Dead Space animated movie, which I think goes between the first and second game, as far as I'm aware. But the animation is beautiful, so check that out. But yeah, if you're a fan of sort of space horror, then this is the one for you. It's great. In at number 8, we have Project 02, or if you're in America, Fatal Frame 2. It has a different name there, don't know why, both of them work. So this one is a Japanese horror game, and this is all about two twin sisters, which is Mio and Mayu, who go into a really spooky town and find out that there is a prophecy and a curse in this town. The prophecy is that some twins will have to, one of them will have to kill the other to break this curse that's on the land. And obviously those being twins, the town sees it as these are, you know, these two girls are our next shot at breaking the curse. This one's a third-person horror, but the great thing about this is the way that you have to defeat the ghosts, the enemies. You have a magical camera, and the same as in the first game, to be able to defeat the ghosts in it, you have to put the camera up to your face, which makes the game first-person view, and then the closer that the enemy gets to you adds more power to this sort of magical shutter that you're going to use in the camera, and causes more damage. So you need to get them as close as possible before you press the shutter, and that's how to either kill them or damage them a lot. And it's pretty scary. It can really make you feel uneasy because you know that you have to get as close to these beings as possible. And some of the effects in it are great. They work really well. I do really enjoy... Oh, the cat is making a cameo. Right. You gonna lie down? Yeah, she is. Yeah, okay. I did really enjoy this game. I played it on the original Xbox. It is out for the PS2, but also a few years ago they did a remastered version of it on the Nintendo Wii, which was great, and it had sort of spruced up graphics and a few new elements to it, but mostly it was it was just a really solid remaster of it, so that's definitely worth checking out. This one, it kind of feels like it just has that sort of really good original spin on horror and how things can be scary but not necessarily action based. So yeah, I definitely say check this one out. It's just one that sticks with you, definitely. It can have some really scary elements to it. So yeah, Project Zero or Fatal Frame, whatever you want to call it, it's great. Diva. So number 7 is Outlast, and this one is a terrifying game. This one is probably the most solid sort of horror experience you can get without actually being able to fight back, which is one of the reasons why it's not higher up on this list. It's set in a sort of haunted and abandoned insane asylum that's filled with not only the last remaining patients, who were all out for blood, obviously, but some crazy creatures as well, some quite scary creatures. You just get followed and hunted and stalked relentlessly in this game. A little bit like Alien Isolation, it feels like a sort of game of hide and seek. And I did enjoy part of it, but I do prefer horror games where you can fight back, and this one just isn't one of those. The good thing about this, though, is you are given a mini DV camera, an old sort of camcorder with a night vision mode on it, and you can go around in the dark finding the things that you need to solve puzzles or just get out of places or just hide if you need to. The bad thing about that camera is, like all cameras, it has a battery, and the battery will run out. And so if you don't keep your eye on the battery, or you don't have reserves ready to go, sometimes it will cut out at the worst time, when you're trying to hide from someone, when you're being chased, or just when you're trying to solve something and you know that you're going to die all the time. So that is definitely something that I liked about the game, that you just had to be aware of everything that you had going on at the time. As I mentioned, it is a game that is very, very much in the horror genre. It is terrifying. I doubt there's anyone that could play this and not be scared by it. It's just a really, really good, solid horror game. And as I mentioned, the only reason why it's not higher on the list is because you can't do anything. You know, if I was stuck in a insane asylum like that and knew I was being hunted, I'd at least try and get like a metal bar or find a knife or something like that. So that, to me, just kind of put me off a little bit, but it's still a great game. So check out Outlast. There is a second one as well, very much more of the same. So at number 6 we have Fear 2, and that is called Project Origins. So Fear stands for fuck everything and run. Oh no, wait. First Encounter Assault Recon. There you go. So this one is a really, really good, solid action first-person shooter. If you're the kind of person that likes your, Call of Duties and Battlefield and things like that, this is a game that would mix that up for you. It still has that great first-person shooter element to it, where everything, feels really sort of high, fast-paced, like high-octane kind of thing, but it also has a really great horror element to it. You have the main villain in this as a girl called Alma. She's a little girl in a red dress, very much like the sort of characters from The Ring and The Grudge. She has psychokinetic powers. She can affect everything around her, and she's always following you, or always pops up whenever you don't expect her to. And it does make for some really great scares. You can slow down time into this sort of Matrix bullet time mode, just take out your enemies in slow motion. It also obviously makes things a little bit easier, but it looks great and it makes you feel really badass, especially when you sort of shoot someone with a shotgun in the torso and the torso it flies past you in slow motion. So if that's your bag, definitely check it out. And this one is the second part of a trilogy. The first one is great. There's also some sort of DLC content for it as well. All of them are really solid. The second one has a really great section in it where you can play inside a mech. You can be inside this huge robot. It looks like a power loader from Aliens, and just go shooting up everyone with lots of rail guns. That was quite good fun. But overall, I'd say the second one is probably the strongest in terms of the horror. The third one, again, like Dead Space, is co-op. The third one I would definitely suggest if you're playing couch co-op with a friend. It's really good fun. You will both fight over which character you get to play, though, because there's one that has sort of special abilities and is able to possess people and use telekinesis, and the other one is your other character that you normally play who can slow down time. So you'll definitely fight over who gets to play them. But Fear is great. It's a great game, and it's definitely one of those games for, as I say, the sort of action genre fan. So at number 5 we have The Last of Us Part 2, and this one I would say is just stunning. It's beautiful. It is a masterpiece, and I absolutely love it. It's a very controversial one. It's a game that divided the fans, quote unquote, but it just looks incredible, really realistic. The acting and the motion capture for it is just insane. It's off the charts. The first Last of Us was the story of guy called Joel and a girl called Ellie travelling across the country because Ellie is immune to this virus that is making all the infected people turn into really crazy zombies, the worst kind of zombies, the fast running ones. As they progress in the infection, they can become these sort of mutated versions called clickers that look like they're covered in really sort of horrible dusty coral, and they could be absolutely terrifying. They're called clickers because they make this really unsettling clicking noise, a little bit like if the Predator had a stammer. The second one picks up a few years later after the events of the first one. Ellie is much older, so you play as Ellie, and it's just a really great scenario in terms of like non-linear storytelling, because not only do you play as Ellie, as I mentioned, you play as this new character, Abby, and Abby is trying to avenge the murder of her father, and in the past 5 years has spent all of her time turning herself into basically a living weapon. She's very, very muscular, very powerful, and very athletic, and obviously the two paths cross. You do get to play them both, I would say, probably in an equal amount. And a lot of people seem to have a problem with, well, Abby. They seem to have a problem with, very much how she looks. There are a lot of misogynistic memes going around the internet about that character. I think that if the tables were turned and the first game was about Abby and her father, then people wouldn't be so angry and bitter towards this game. And now I'm not going to spoil too much about it, but I just think that it seems really strange that people would go after a character like that. And I think that if she was the protagonist of the first one, or at least her story was, then seeing her in the second one, all beefed up and ready to take on, the person who murdered her father, I think people would respond to it and she would be, a sort of hero in the gaming genre. It's just really strange how people automatically hated that character so much that it became, a bit of a bittersweet marketing campaign for them, I think. But I think this game is incredible. As I mentioned, it is a haunting experience. It is not, something that you will particularly enjoy in that sense of the word. You'll enjoy it for the journey that you go on and the message that this has. I could probably make a video about this game all on its own, as you could probably tell. But the message in this about revenge, about ending a cycle of violence, and about forgiveness and empathy, things like that, and just things that you wouldn't expect to be brought up in some video games. This one just really goes in on these themes, and with those messages, I think it can be quite difficult for some people to play this, just because they want that revenge, they want that payback, they want the payoff and the violence, and it's not about that. And I think they're maybe the people that need to listen to that message the most, but probably the ones that won't. But it is a very, very interesting game, and it will stick with you after you finished it. I've played it through twice now, and I definitely say it's one that you'll want to play again, but not in a hurry, just because you're still processing what's happened. Definitely check out The Last of Us 2, and don't listen to all the haters. So at number 4, what is it? It's Evil Within 2. So the first Evil Within game was very much an action horror. It kind of felt like a predecessor to Resident Evil 6, if you know what I mean by that. The Resident Evil games kind of turned a little bit into an action game instead of a survival horror for a while, and this one is very much in that kind of genre, but the second one just ramps up the style and the uneasy feeling that you get in some sort of dreamscape horror games. There's some really strange sequences in it. There's a great bad guy in a sort of serial killer that likes to create these art pieces out of his victims. This one, it still has your bang average video game protagonist. He's the grumpy straight white dude that you play in most video games, but if you can get past that and just kind of accept that that's who he is, you do learn a lot more about him in this one. He does become a little bit more fleshed out than he did in the first, but this one is great. It looks insane. It's just a really well-crafted, beautiful horror game. It does have some amazing action elements to it, but also a lot of stealth in this one as well, which is cool. And it does have a really good kind of sense of what it wants to tell in terms of the horror genre. So you do find that there's a lot of callbacks to the first game, but also a lot of homages to various films and genres in horror, and that's why I think I liked it. There are some comics that go along with this that are sort of prelude to the second game, but overall this one, I'd say if you can play through the first one and just blitz through it just to get familiar with the universe and what it's trying to say and the characters, then great. But otherwise, this one is definitely the one that I'd recommend. The Evil Within 2 is so much fun. It's very cinematic as well, so it's a good one to play if you've got friends around. So in at number 3, we have a game from the Silent Hill franchise. Yes, I'm wearing my Silent Hill live t-shirt. I went to the live tour in the UK when they came to the UK. It was great. I am a massive fan of the Silent Hill franchise, and the one I've picked for this list is Silent Hill 4, The Room. So everyone always thinks I'm going to say Silent Hill 2, which is probably the most famous one, and it is fantastic. It is one of my favourite games of the franchise, but for some reason Silent Hill 4 was just the one that I connected with. It came along at the right time when I was playing horror games on the original Xbox, and it's just a really great experience, a Silent Hill game that is a standalone story like Silent Hill 2, so it doesn't have all the baggage of the sort of ongoing story that was in 1 and 3, which was with Alessa and Heather and the cult and things like that, what was basically the subject of like the first and second Silent Hill movies. The first one was great, by the way. But this one is great because you're playing a new character called Henry who wakes up trapped in his own apartment. And the door is chained and padlocked. The windows are all forced shut and you can't get out, but it's all chained from the inside. So it's something that you have probably done and you need to figure out what's been going on. And you find that behind your bathroom mirror there is a big hole and a big tunnel that you have to crawl across to get to Silent Hill, as you do, happens to us all. And when you get there, you find that a lot of the people that you see in the real world, out of your window or through the spy hole in your door, are also trapped in there. You kind of feel like you're either in their dreams or they're in yours. And also the main villain in this one, Walter, the serial killer, you have to find out how to defeat him and also find out more about him, and he is a great character. And the good thing about this one that I really responded to was I liked the fact that the room, which is what it's called, is somewhere that you can come back to where you feel safe, and it's somewhere that feels familiar because you spend the first obviously few minutes of the game getting to know the apartment, so you can always come back there at the end of each mission and save and store some items in your flat. And throughout the game, that gets messed with. So the more things that you bring back from Silent Hill and store in your flat, or the more times that you come back to your apartment, the more messed up and possessed your house gets. The walls start peeling, it gets like really rusty, there's bloody footsteps all over your apartment, soon like creatures start coming out of the walls, so you really feel by the end that there's nowhere that you can go. You may as well just stay in Silent Hill and try and figure all this out and defeat who you can. And I really like that element to it. The game looks fantastic. The video that you're seeing is from the trailer, and it's intentionally blurry and shaky, so don't let that put you off. It is a great looking game, but they did this on purpose, and it goes well with the soundtrack that accompanied the trailer and the game. But yeah, Silent Hill 4 is definitely my favourite of the franchise. Obviously, honourable mentions, the first two games are great. Really enjoyed them. The second one, as I mentioned, is the iconic one. Silent Hill Homecoming is amazing. That's a more recent game. It still does a really good job of sort of upholding the certain parts of the franchise. We don't talk about Silent Hill Downpour. It was unfinished, and they released it really glitchy and buggy, and it was not a good experience. In fact, I don't even think I finished it because it was that messed up. And hopefully we're going to get a new Silent Hill game at some point, because we all remember Silent Hills, the PT demo that was incredibly disturbing on the PlayStation, that got soon deleted because the game was never going to be a thing. But yeah, this franchise, it's a staple of the horror genre in terms of video gaming, and I definitely recommend Silent Hill 4, especially if it's your first Silent Hill game as well. I think it would probably be a good one to start with. So in at number 2, our penultimate game is Blair Witch. So the Blair Witch video game obviously follows a lot of the things that happened in the movies, but it's a brand new story, and you're playing a character who is going into the Burkittsville woods, formerly Blair, to go and find a missing boy who everyone believes has been kidnapped. So you go in there with your trusty dog Bullet, and Bullet is kind of customizable at the beginning. He's an Alsatian type dog, but you can change the colour of his fur and the colour of his eyes, things like that, but he obviously has the same personality throughout. One mistake I made was that I thought, if I'm going into a really dark wood, it would be really great if my dog had really bright blue eyes so that I could see him in the dark. That's also quite scary if you can't see the dog and then it suddenly turns around and you see these two beady eyes in the distance. So make of that what you will. But the dog is a great companion. It makes you feel less alone and sometimes a bit less scared. And when the dog gets scared, you can also comfort him. So it's quite a nice thing to put in there. This game does have callbacks to the films. Obviously the first one is a genre changer, and is a sort of staple of the found footage genre. Found footage is probably my favourite subgenre of horror, so this one was a really special game to play. I do really enjoy the sequel to Blair Witch as well, not Book of Shadows, that one's rubbish, but the 2016 sequel. The last 20 minutes of that film are terrifying, and this game very much feels like that. This one has the added effect of having a mini DV camcorder, a bit like Outlast had as well. So you have that night vision camcorder, but also along the way you'll find these little mini DV tapes. So you put the tape into your camera, watch what's going on, and you realise that whatever's happened in the past, if you pause the video at a specific time, it can affect the present. So if someone is being chased in the videotape in the past and they leave a door open, you can pause it at that point, and when you get to that house, that door will be left open because of that. It's sort of like that time-bending thing that the Blair Witch can do. It sort of affects this camera as well, which is a great mechanic, and it helps you to solve so many puzzles, but you have to be very clever about how you do this and the timing of it as well. So that was a great element to it. Another fun thing about this game is that it gives you a mobile phone, a really old mobile phone, And it's essentially a working phone. You can go through the contacts, you can call certain people, you can speak to the main character's girlfriend, you can check your voicemails, you get some creepy text messages on it, but also you can go to the games section and play Snake. You can play Snake from the 90s. So if you get too scared and you're in the middle of the woods and you think, I just need to calm down for a bit, and the dog's all calm, you get your phone out and play Snake for a little bit. Genius. Loved it. And this one, like a lot of horror games, has multiple endings. So a few of the ones that I've mentioned previously, like Project Zero and Silent Hill, they both have multiple endings too. So depending on how you treat certain characters and depending on what choices you make in this game can depend on what happens at the end. I do like that about the genre as well. I do like the effort that goes into making these games replayable. So that is something that I'd certainly recommend for the Blair Witch game. It is terrifying being in the woods, hearing all these crazy sounds in the background like you do in the films. You do feel like you get lost a lot, and you do feel like when you're in there, there's no way out, or that you're not following the right path, even sometimes when you are and you don't know it. So it's definitely one that builds on that sort of paranoia aspect. I can't recommend it enough, especially if you're a fan of the films, but it is like very, very scary. So yeah, Blair Witch. So this is it, the final entry. This is my number one scariest game. It is from the Resident Evil franchise, and it is Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Terrifying. This game is another first-person game. It's the first-person game, as far as I'm aware, in the Resident Evil franchise. They're usually third-person, either fixed camera or you sort of Tomb Raider style. But this one is just basically a return to form. So I'd say 4, 5, and 6 got progressively more action, as I mentioned before. And I still enjoyed them, especially co-op, as I mentioned. But 7 was the return of being a survival horror game, and you feel like you are in a really horrible, grotty, smelly house that you need to find your girlfriend and get her out of there because she sent you this videotape saying that don't come for her. She's trapped somewhere, but don't come. And that obviously forces the main character, Ethan, to go and find her. The beginning of this game shows you that it's not your typical sort of Resident Evil game, in the fact that all the puzzles are there to do straight away. Some of them you have to watch these videotapes that show you how to solve things in the present because they got solved in the past. So that was quite a nice element to it. The main villains in it are this sort of redneck southern family in America, but they're also just mutated and horrible, and you feel like when you're in the beginning of the game and you've just met them, you're in like Texas Chainsaw Massacre basically, and these people just just mutilate and torture you and abuse each other, and it's very disturbing, but they are the enemies for the rest of the game. And some of them just will not die. So it does get quite scary. There are some hide and seek elements to this, and there are some really, really great set pieces. You end up walking around this place feeling like you don't want to be there because it looks like it's going to smell so bad, and that's just strange to me, but that's the only way I can explain it. I will say also that out of all of the games that I've mentioned, the sound design on this one is just on another level. It is incredible. Just walking around the place and you can hear the creaking floorboards above you or in another room, or you can hear someone in the cellar below you, or you can just feel this sense of unease just because of the sound design, and I do appreciate when people put that extra effort into just creating that whole atmosphere. This is one that I would say you could play with friends around. They'd probably help you with the puzzles, but also they would probably appreciate the experience of watching it. And it is just a really great horror game. It's my favourite out of the Resident Evil franchise because it scared me so much. Now, all these games that I've mentioned, as with most horror, I would recommend playing them in the dark. don't be the person that plays them in the day. There's just no point. But play them in the dark and on the biggest screen you can. If you're playing alone and you're feeling brave, pop some headphones in for, you know, the ultimate effect. But also a lot of them you can play with company and you'll all experience it together and you can all be scared together. But it's definitely the best played in the dark. So that's my top tip, I guess. And games that I haven't mentioned because I haven't finished them, I've only got them recently, would be Man of Medan and Maid of Skyer, however you say it. And one that I definitely want to play is Layers of Fear. That looks really good. But if there's any that I haven't mentioned that you think I should play, then obviously comment below. Let me know if any of my top 20 are in your top 20, and also let me know what you think of my picks, if some of them should be you know, up or down the list depending on your experiences of it. I'd really like to hear about that. And yeah, I will be playing a horror game next on this channel. It might be The Evil Within 2, because I just think that would be a really solid game to go through with people watching, but also you know, there are some new ones that I'd like to play as well. So if there's something that you'd want to see out of this list and you want me to do a playthrough of it, then let me know, hit me up in the comments. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and you know, leave a like and subscribe below and all those usual YouTube things. But thank you again. I hope you've enjoyed it, and yeah, good luck with all those games if you're going to try one next.